Today we're going to be talking about shooting tips and tricks, and I'll introduce the panel in just a moment, but we're going to be covering different release aids, different techniques and different styles and mechanics of shooting all three different styles of release aids. And then Jake's going to cover some important things that may help you with customers using fingers, whether it's traditional, Olympic style, recurves, longbows. So first of all, I'm going to start introducing everybody. To my far left, we've got Mr. Jake Kaminski. Jake is Olympic silver medalist, former Vegas champion, and also the co-founder of the Aptitude bow tuning app that you can find on your app stores. Next is 6-time world record holder and 3-time Vegas champion Reo Wilde. Reo has been with us for a few years now, and he also has his own line of releases with us. To my immediate right here is Mr. Dan McCarthy. Dan is a world-renowned 3D archer and also an ASA world champion. And then our far right is Jesse Broadwater. Jesse is a 7-time NFAA outdoor national champion and a 2-time Vegas champion, and also another co-founder of the Aptitude bow tuning app. So check that out on your bow or your smartphones and get some more valuable information. To get right into it, we only have an hour, so we're going to start going. We're going to start with back tension releases. It seems to be getting more and more popular, as do all handheld style releases. We're seeing a pretty good trend of more and more people are getting in tune to want to try something different other than just your standard index style trigger release that we're all at some point gone through in our, whether it be bow hunting days or target shooting. So I'm going to hand the mic over to a couple different people that I know shoot back tension. I want them to explain the back tension release they use, why they use it, the technique that they use for shooting it, because there's multiple different techniques in activating a back tension release, and there's a lot of misconceptions as well. So I want them to explain to you the way they use it and any advantages that they see in using a back tension release over a thumb activated or an index style. So I'm going to start out with Jesse, and he can explain to you the way he uses the back tension release.
Good morning. I started out shooting a back tension release. I grew up shooting one probably when I was 7 years old. I used to shoot a 2-finger back tension, and I think one of the most important things is getting started out right with shooting one and getting taught the right way. And I think if you do that, I think it's the most consistent and the most pure style of shooting. But the biggest thing that I tell people, when they're starting out is, just go up close to a bale and set the release heavy to where, it's not going to go off when you're pulling it back. You're not going to hit yourself and get scared of it right away. So set it heavy, go up to a bale and just, feel the action of the release, feel how it actually works. Even if you're not using it the right way, the proper way in the beginning, at least you're not scared of it and you don't get turned away from it. So go up close, set it heavy, and then go through the motions and feel how it works and goes off, and then eventually just little by little start setting it a little bit hotter, until you get to where your shot timing's a little bit better, and then go from there. And then you can start working on the proper technique and feeling the best way for you to relax through the shot and let the shot go off. And I think that's how I shoot the release. I kind of just relax through it. I don't get real tense on it. I don't really grip the release really tight and pull really hard. I'm the kind of guy that just kind of likes to get up there and just let the sight pin float around and just kind of relax through the shot. And I do that by just letting the release, slide out on my fingers wherever it wants to slide, and then letting my whole wrist and forearm and bicep relax and making sure that it's stays relaxed, and just letting my back muscles basically hold the bow back. So the release is just kind of hanging on the pads of my fingers right there. And, then you set it to where, if you shoot a click, which I do, you set it to where, as you just settle in and drop your thumb off the peg, the release will come to its click. And then, all I do, I don't even really think about it. I just sit there and aim. And as I'm kind of relaxing through and making sure my arm's relaxed, the shot I build up a little bit of tension and the shot just breaks. So I think having it set with the correct travel, whether you shoot a click or not, is pretty important. And that just takes time. I mean, it takes time to getting it set right for your shot timing and everything. So it does take a little bit of playing around with to get it right. But, I think when you do, get it right and you get your shot timing down, you start going through those shots with a back tension, I think that a lot of people love it. I mean, like I said, it's, the most pure type of shot, I think, because you don't ever have to worry about, a button to push or anything. And you can shoot a button release the same way. I'm not saying that, that to shy away from a button release because you're going to get target panic by shooting one, but if you start out by shooting back tension, it's, I think a little bit easier for a beginner to cross over onto a button and, not get target panic or whatever. But, because I shoot a button the same way, and with the new releases that we come out with, there's a button that's the exact same handle and exact same feel, but it is a button actuated release. And I set it up the same way with a trigger extension on there, to where the trigger comes back and contacts my thumb in the same spot that it would be if I was shooting a back tension release. So I'll set it up to where, as I come back and I drop my thumb off the peg of the back tension, my thumb is hanging there. Well, I'll set the extension peg on the button release to where it's just right there where my thumb would be, and then I basically just relax through the button release the same way, and it feels exactly the same as back tension. But that's that's a little bit of how I do it. And like I said, my shot revolves around just staying relaxed and relaxing through the shot. There's other people that pull a little bit harder, get a little bit deeper in the release, and that's fine. I mean, you got to find out what works for you. But like I said, the main thing is at first making sure that it's set heavy enough to where you don't get scared of it, and just go through the motions and feel how the release actually works, and then little by little just make it a little bit harder as you go along.
As Jesse mentioned, he uses a click, and I want Reo to talk a little bit about not using a click, because I know he doesn't use a click, and kind of explain to you the differences, and if you should lean one way or another, or why would you not use a click, and tell the people why you think it's beneficial to you.
Okay. I agree a lot with what Jesse said about how you learn to do it up close. Spend the time, make sure you're not afraid of it, everything like that. It's funny how a lot of the things that we all learn, we've learned really similar, but from different people and everything else. The reason I don't use a click is because, I feel like we have a shot window that's so wide. And when you get up there, and I have a problem with the click, because when I get up and it goes click and my dot bounces, I feel like I have to restart my whole shot. So now I've lost part of my shot window. So that's kind of something I've taught myself, just to use it without a click, because I like being able to hold longer, and if I have to go longer into a shot, because most of the time when we miss or we do something bad, it's because we're on the descending end of our shot window, so that if I can make that a little longer or be able to stay with that, it usually turns out better for me. So that's one reason I don't use a click. But like I said, Jesse covered a lot of the real good reasons. Me, I do more tension and pulling, and there's a little movement in my hand when I pull, because I want to keep my tensions the same. I load up a little more than he does. But there's a lot of different ways guys do it, from relaxing an index finger to pulling really hard. And I wouldn't say any of them are wrong. The biggest thing is just keep the tension sane all the way through the shot, so that you have a good execution. It's repetitive, and that's the biggest part, I think, of back tension. I think that's why a lot of people are going to it, is because it keeps you more consistent. We can hammer a trigger a lot of times, we can do a lot of different things, and there's nothing wrong with a thumb trigger. I won a lot of tournaments with a thumb trigger for a lot of years, but my dad actually taught me on a back tension, and he told me, he said, if you will learn on a back tension, you can shoot any release. It's just one thing that he teaches you how to pull, and so he says that's the biggest part of any of it.
And just in case, some of you don't know what, the back tension is, it's basically a triggerless release. And I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but, you have a sear edge, it comes in contact with the end of another hook, and basically you're rotating to a point to where it releases the string. And, that's very important as far as understanding the way a tension release works, because, some guys like to rotate, and just, you constantly see their hand moving throughout the entire shot. I know some of the, top shooters in the world shoot that. You see them come to full draw and they never stop until the arrow's gone. And that's just one technique that neither one of these guys use, but it's, it's out there and people do use it that way. It's more, I call it more like a twister, because you're constantly twisting the release till it fires, as opposed to building tension and, waiting on the shot to fire. Another release I wanted to, or another, excuse me, another thing that's important to point out here is most of the people that fail at back tension or that give up on it are intimidated by it or afraid of it. And something to point out here is there are tension releases that have safety activation switches or safeties, and that's important to know as dealers for people that want to go down that road. It just gives you the added security of drawing the bow, attaining full draw and getting settled in without having to worry about knocking your teeth out or hitting yourself in the face. And which has happened, and we get calls all the time where it's happened. So it's just if you haven't seen a safety activated back tension release, it's there. They're out there to purchase, and it's been one of our staples in our lineup for years, and it continues to be as we continue to develop it and make it better each and every time we get a chance to redevelop it. So, which from what I understand is coming soon again. So that kind of explains a little bit of the back tension releases, and I'll open up for questions at the end for specific questions about back tension, as well as all the other types of release aids and the way we activate them. But I'm going to hand the mic over to Dan McCarthy now, because Dan is and has been for a long time one of the best 3D shooters out there using the thumb activated release. And I think he's used predominantly the thumb activated release for a long time. So I want him to start describing that to you, explaining the advantage that he sees. We'll talk to Reo again, because he's shot one for years as well, and go on from there. So Dan.
Right now I use the Absolute 360. I've used several different releases that they use now, and I think the biggest problem that a lot of people have with like a thumb trigger is they always leave like the option to punch it, and maybe in Reo's stuff that you guys have shot in field where the time gets down to that last second, and it's either take a zero or punch it. Maybe that's a scenario that I would consider it okay, but for me to shoot it well, like I have to have the mentality that like I'd rather sit there and pull through the shot to the point where I'm shaking, trembling, and miss than set the release off and hit a bullseye. Because if you give yourself even like a window in your brain to punch the release as an option, you're probably going to do it. And so, if I'm trying to teach somebody how to shoot a trigger, that's one of the main things I try to like get it to sink into their head. Like the punching can't be an option, and if it is, you're always going to have that tendency to want to do it. If the pressure gets, if you get into a pressure situation, whether it's deer hunting, a big buck comes in, or whether it's at a tournament or whatever, you're probably going to hammer it. You're probably going to punch it. And so I try to just relax through my shot, fire it a lot like a hinge, and I don't compete with a hinge. I have before, and I shoot them a lot kind of the same way. But for me, I've always found like with a hinge, I can execute extremely good shots on dots and like indoors, where I can see my pin, I can see the bullseye, and I can just stay really relaxed and just work through the shot on a dot, because I can see that my pin's perfectly in the center of the bullseye. But for me, when I went outside on 3D targets, my shot rhythm kind of changed. And so when I lost the bullseye or whatever around my pin, I seemed to not like freeze up, but my shot took a lot longer. It'd take 7-8 seconds longer sometimes than a trigger. And like Reo said, if you make a mistake, it's usually on the backside of the shot. And so for me, my rhythm stayed closer to the same with a trigger. And I could keep on 3D targets, I could settle in, kind of look exactly where I wanted to hit, put my pin there, and then I'd just start pulling through the shot, and the shot would fire. And I think another thing to talk about with a trigger is just like back tension, I believe wholeheartedly in like constant movement. So once you start the shot, like stay with it. And if you stop the shot, if the wind blows or something, you come off the dot, you freeze for a second or something, just break the, let down, start the shot over, and get back up there. But I think starting and stopping, your rhythms, or starting and stopping your shot, usually ends up bad. Without a trigger up here, do we have anything similar? I guess just this one. The other thing, I guess, for me, for triggers, how I load or preload a trigger is probably important. I don't put a whole lot of pressure on the trigger with my thumb. I shoot a fairly light trigger, somewhat like a gun trigger, maybe 2 pounds, somewhere in that area. And your poundage is gonna change with your let off. So if you're a really high let off bow, or you're only holding 12 pounds or 13 pounds, you're probably gonna want a lighter trigger. And then if you're holding a lot of poundage, you're gonna want a little bit heavier trigger. It just has to do with the load of your bow and that tension with your back. And what I do, rather than preloading with my thumb or actually applying pressure into the trigger with my thumb, is I actually make a fist. And then as I make a fist, I just set my thumb on the trigger. And then from that point, I lock my thumb in place, and I don't ever add any more pressure with my thumb. And then I relax my fingers and actually relax the tension in my forearm and my back and everything, and that allows the release to move forward into my hand, and that's what actually preloads it up against my thumb. And it just helps me to not ever get in the habit of squeezing with your thumb or doing anything even remotely close to punching. And so as I just relax, I'll feel that tension build and the pressure build against the trigger on my thumb. And then once I feel the preload about where it's at, I just keep relaxing through the shot and keep relaxing those fingers, just like I'd be shooting a back tension. And I just tighten up with my back. And it's called back tension, but to me, like, I kind of think about it more like a transfer of energy. Rather than actually creating tension in your back. For me, it's kind of more, you start with tension here, and then as you relax your forearm, like Jesse was talking about, relax these muscles in your wrist, your forearm, and your hand. I just mostly pick up that slack in my back. So I just keep tightening my back muscles to kind of equal out the amount of pressure that I'm releasing in my forearm. So I'm not really ever building more pressure. I'm just transferring that tension from my arm and my bicep and stuff into my back. And those muscles, and just let the pressure build against the trigger until it fires. But that's pretty much it on the triggers.
Another thing to consider is with a thumb activation release, people do get wanting to punch it. Just like an index finger. I've always told people working in a shop before that it just seems to me like there's a something that runs from the tip of your finger to your brain that says hammer. Same thing with the thumb. And one thing to consider, with a thumb activated style release, and something you can instruct your customers to do, is to simply touch your thumb and index finger. It does two things. It gets us in the same location on the trigger every time to activate it, which is going to in turn give us more accuracy. Having the same. What we're trying to do is repeat the same thing over and over again. Well, if you have your thumb out here on the tip of the trigger, you might be on the end one shot, you might be in the middle you may be in close to the body the next shot. So if you have an indicator or another style of, or another anchor point to where you're getting the same thing over and over again, and one way to do that is to touch the thumb and index finger like that around the trigger. It's just going to make us more consistent and, you know, give us that consistent shot after shot feel. And, you know, it kind of, you know, gets the trigger in a position on your finger to where you're less susceptible to punching. You can still do it, but it's a lot more difficult because it's a lot harder to get this portion of your finger to move as opposed to out here on the end. It travels at a lot faster rate out here on the end, so which could in turn, you know, create some issues with punching the trigger. If you get it laid back in there, you're more susceptible, kind of, you know, pull attention into the shot and fire. So that's you know, something to consider when, you know, instructing you know, customers on how to you know, activate. It's one way to activate the thumb activated trigger. So now is probably, you know, the most familiar all of us are. You know, the most amount of releases we sell and you sell, you know, is the index style trigger. And at some point, I think everybody up here has used this style of trigger, and probably you guys as well. And there's, just like anything, there's many numerous different types of or ways to activate, you know, an index style trigger. There's, you know, a lot of bad habits that can be picked up by, you know, activate them in certain ways. And, you know, there's advantages to using them, you know, and there's a lot of disadvantages as well. But I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about the index style trigger release with everybody, and kind of have them give you some information on, you know, when they used it, you know, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and you know, we'll just go down the line, starting with Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, T.R.U has a wide array of releases and wrist strap releases, and the biggest thing, I mean, I started out shooting one for hunting. When I first got into hunting, you know, I always shot a back tension thing. When I first got into hunting, I always shot a wrist strap. And the biggest thing I noticed, and my dad would always, you know, try to teach me, was to get one that fit right, and to not have the trigger out close to the end of your finger. And the same thing that Brandon was talking about with the thumb button releases. You know, you want to try to keep any kind of trigger away from the tips of your finger or your thumb. So I think having you know, an adjustable strap or band to where you can get that trigger back, and to where you can get a good wrap on it, is very important. You're going to be less susceptible to punching it or you know, building anticipation if you want to wrap your finger around it. So and that was the biggest thing that helped me was to get the trigger back, you know, into my, you know, off the tip of my finger, and then you know, I would just tell myself, you know, when I got back there, just to kind of pretend like, you know, all you want to do is just point your finger, start pointing it back behind you, and you know, just kind of get that wrap on it, and just pretend like you want to point back behind you, and then, you know, the release would fire. You know, still keeping your whole arm and everything relaxed, and just let the, you know, the strap do its job and hold the release. But you know, that's, and you know, we always taught people in our shop, you know, when they would come in, we'd see them. And everyone would always have the trigger out on the tip of their finger, you know, and they, you know, some people would get a wind up on it and, you know, crash it, and, you know, I'd go right over and I'd say, let me see your release, take the release, and, you know, if it was one where I could adjust it, I'd, you know, shorten the strap way up, and, you know, it was hard for them to get used to, you know, the first couple shots, but once they felt that wrap, you know, their finger wrap around, you know, and, man, they would just pull right through it, and it would totally change their shot and their accuracy and everything. And I mean, they was tickled to death with it, you know, once you taught them that one little thing. So, like I said, I think that's the most important thing. And you know, with the adjustability now and the different, you know, swept back trigger designs and adjustable straps and everything, I mean, there's a wrist strap out there for everyone, even kids. So you just gotta get it set right to where they, you know, they don't want to wind up on the trigger, and I think that's the most important thing.
I don't have a whole lot to add, I guess, really, with the straps, because Jesse covered it right. They can be shot just like a back tension with the same style. the surprise release. A lot of it just has to do with, firing it similar to how Jesse said, or when I shot one. I kind of did the same thing. The way I shoot a regular thumb trigger is I hook my finger, I lock my finger in place, and then from there I just pull it through. One of the things I do see people do a lot wrong is they white grip the strap right here with these fingers underneath. That adds a ton of tension down your forearm, and it actually tightens up all these muscles in your forearm that you don't want to be tight while trying to shoot a back tension or trying to shoot anything with back tension. So I guess the most important thing for that is just, if you see anybody doing that or you're working with somebody, just, relax those fingers. They should be just kind of dangling there and relaxed, and let the strap do its work and actually hold the release on your wrist, and then just hook your finger in place and just kind of pull through the shot. That's really it, but it is important, just as anything else, I guess, draw length or anything to get it to fit you. I mean, it needs to fit into your finger properly so that you're comfortable. And like Jesse said, there's tons of different options available for you guys to get them to fit properly, but that's about it.
One thing that I'll add to this, and we'll get the other guys' opinions, is, when I was in the shop, you saw a lot with an index style release, the guys coming in, you saw a lot of free floating anchors, like, the wrist, the strap, is basically out here floating in air. I don't know if it was, the archer's afraid to get the string or the release close to their face, but that's one thing you want to try to eliminate as far as, trying to make the archer as best they could be, is to, get the release in close to their face where they're more steady. The release isn't out here, moving around. Again, on the back end of a shot, it's just going to move worse. So, my input on the index style release, along with their form and fit that they had mentioned, is to, try to get that release close to the face, build a more solid anchor point, eliminate the floating release age, just because I think it's not necessarily a bad habit. Some people were never taught correctly, and that just, is what feels comfortable to them. And most of the time that, seems to be the issue. Somebody isn't taught, the proper way, or, they're just thrown, a particular style of release and expected to figure out, and that's just what felt good to them. So, my input would be to, try to eliminate that and make the archer the best they could be by giving them a nice solid anchor point.
Makes it tough. Them guys covered it pretty good. I think Jesse hit the biggest point, is making it fit right. I think that's a big problem I see more than anything, is guys reaching out there and slapping it. Danny hit another great point about how you can shoot. You can actually shoot it like a back tension. If you load it up right, get your finger on it and draw, it'll go off. I think that's huge, because our motor skills are really weird. If you hold your hand behind your head and you try and move a finger, you lose your focus from here to there, where if you're just pulling with an arm or moving a big appendage, you don't lose that focus from there to there. So to me, if you learn how a guy can learn how to get his finger on it and just execute and pull, he can stay focused on the target and make a better shot. And so I think that's a big part of teaching a guy how to shoot any type trigger release, because they can focus on, and if we can get it where you focus on the target, archery becomes a lot easier. So to me, I think with a hinge, make it fit, or a back tension or even an index. The biggest thing is make it fit and teach them how to execute the same shot, so they build tension. Because if we grab the back of the chair or somebody pulls, your hand naturally will close and set off as you draw or pull. So it will just trigger the release to go off, and I think that's the biggest thing, so that it's not a huge let's take it, let's go. And I mean, like Danny talked about, some of us, when we get down on time, we have to make the shot go. I still cannot punch a release. I can't make a thumb trigger or the other one go. I can pull really hard and be more aggressive with it, but I have a hard time with that punching it off, because like I say, you lose your focus from there to there, and who knows where the arrow will go. So that's a big part. I worked hard on teaching myself, so that's a big part, I think, in helping anybody shoot any release. So.
And a lot of you guys don't know, I shoot recurve, but I started with a compound when I was 6 years old. I was never really taught properly how to execute a release. First picked up a wrist wrap and then eventually switched to a 3-finger back tension. But you know, most of you guys are dealers or retailers, and I think really if you want to keep your customers, you really need to teach them properly from the beginning. Invest the time in them, and they will continue to be around. Now, I shied away from compound when I was 12 to 14 years old because I had developed target panic so bad that it was just completely unenjoyable to me. I shot a hinge, and I knew the further I rotated my hand, the closer it was to going off. So even with the pin in the middle, as my hand slowly came back, or as I kept adding more pressure, my pin just kept going down and down and down and down. Eventually, I couldn't even hold the pin on the target. And I think that is why I switched to recurve mostly. Like, the most determining factor was I still enjoyed archery, but it became so frustrating to me to shoot a release that I just couldn't do it anymore. So I think for you guys as retailers, in order to keep your customers coming back, is to teach them properly from the beginning. And as soon as you see them straying away from the right way and starting to develop the bad habits, bring them back. I mean, yes, some people can deal with it, but target panic, I think, is the most single detrimental thing to an individual, and probably one of the highest causes for people to put down the bow and never pick it up again. So I would definitely recommend teaching them the right way to begin with. Now, I completely agree with them. That's how you're supposed to shoot a finger trigger, but I still have a hard time, and I still do not shoot it properly, but yeah.
Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit and go back to Jake in just a moment, but with the ever-growing popularity of programs like NASP and other after-school archery programs, it's been strong the last few years, and it's continuing to be strong, where a lot of kids, women, adults are coming in and inquiring about archery. And generally, if they're in an after-school program or a program like NASP, they're going to begin shooting with fingers. And I want Jake to kind of give you some information on shooting with fingers, or a finger tab, or with a glove, that may help you with your customers that are coming in inquiring, new to archery.
Okay, so I'll talk about the concept of what is release and follow through. Okay, release is a part of an action. I'm a firm believer on what these guys are saying as they're pulling through the shot. It's something that they're continually adding and adding and adding, or as Jesse's doing, he's relaxing, or Jesse and the two guys over there, Jesse and Dan, as they're pulling through, they're relaxing their forearms basically and continuing to add pressure in their back, and they're continuing to add until the shot breaks, but they have a follow through and they're continuing through. Now, with a recurve, it's basically the same type of thing. You don't want to add pressure and add pressure and add pressure and then all of a sudden decide, okay, I'm going to release the string and then not follow through. That would basically be like throwing a baseball. You throw a ball, and as soon as you come to the top, you let go and you stop. Nobody does that. Or you go to kick a ball, and as soon as it touches your foot, you stop moving. The reason why you follow through in those sports is because you're putting direction on that ball. You're throwing it at the target. You're kicking it towards the target. You're putting direction onto it. Now, the release on a recurve is very similar, or a NASPO or whatever. So as I'm pulling through, I let go of the string, but I continue my pressure, the same exact pressure that I had while I was activating the shot or pulling through the shot. And I continue that movement until I stop, okay? Now, that's where I say release is part of an action. So as I'm adding pressure, I release, but I continue that pressure until I stop moving, okay? Make sense? Now, why that's important is the direction of putting that pressure towards the same thing, same direction, and that way you don't lose and create a hiccup, or really a stop point in that function, okay? So what I do as far as letting go of the string is I actually just relax the fingers, and I kind of let the string cut through my fingers. Now, the reason that I do that is because on high-speed camera, if you see somebody as they are pulling through and they let go of the string and do this, in slow motion, they actually are pulling, and then as they're letting go, the fingers actually relax, the string pushes the fingers out of their way, it closes, and then they open their fingers. Because you physically cannot open your fingers fast enough to just let the string go by. So why do that? There's no point, and it develops bad habits. So you might as well, from the beginning, teach your kids to just let the string push your fingers by. You can also say, let the string just cut through your fingers. Imagine them cutting through your fingers, and you want to see them let go of the string and come back in this same place. The biggest thing with a recurve is a pluck, and a pluck is just their fingers hang up on the string and pop out away from their face as they come back. You want to see it just like a release and just see it come back straight to their finish point of their follow through, okay? Now, I'm a firm believer in seeing that follow through is a reaction, not an action of the shot, okay? Now, what I mean by that is it's a cause, not an action. So the release or the follow through point, or what happens during the follow through, is determined by what is happening while they are activating the shot. So if I'm pulling and pulling and pulling and I'm doing nothing on the front half, as I release, I'm gonna do something like this as I let go, okay, or I'm gonna fall back. So to keep that from happening, I'm adding pressure on the front half to balance it, so I stay nice and centrally located and I don't pivot backwards. Okay, that's one example, or an example of a pluck or a collapse when they shoot. Now what's happening there is they're completely losing the tension that they have pulling back against the bow at the moment of release, and they're collapsing and relaxing instead of continuing to pull through. So those are a couple of things that a lot of youth and beginners do in the beginning because they're not taught correctly from the beginning. Now I think the majority of, even if you guys are still fingers compound shooters or whatever, but a lot of the highest level recurve shooters all use a clicker. A clicker is a device, for you guys that don't know, a device that rests against the arrow and actually has tension against the tip of the arrow. So as you're pulling back, it gets to a point that's basically a draw check. And once you get to full draw and continually pulling through, the clicker drops and smacks against the riser and clicks. And that's what tells me to shoot and let go of the string. Now we do that because on recurve we don't have draw stops. So as I get back to 28 inches of full draw, if I add another inch of draw length, that adds 2 more pounds, roughly. And 2 pounds on a very light arrow at 100 yards makes a huge difference in impact, okay? So that's why everybody uses a clicker, because it makes sure you're using the same exact weight and you're at the same exact draw length and the same position every single time. So when it fires, it's always the same. So I think it's something that you need to teach your archers as soon as you believe that they have a capacity or they have the ability to maintain their shot cycle or their composure while they're shooting under some sort of duress, because this will cause them stress because it's something new and you don't want them to revert back to old bad habits. But it's just like shooting a hinge for the first time. Go up the blank veil up really close and just teach them that, okay, you're gonna come in, settle into your anchor, and then you're gonna begin to execute and slowly add pressure, slowly rotate around. And when that clicker fires, just let the string cut through your fingers and continue pulling until you stop moving. Because that's, after you teach them how to use the clicker and how it's useful, they will again begin to start to want to collapse right when the clicker clicks, because they think the shot ends when they let go. The shot ends when you finish, okay? So, I mean, that's a little bit of the basics on, well, it's not really basics, but it's an important concept. And that's what I think the biggest archers, or the biggest problem in the US is a misconception of what is release and what is follow through, especially with finger shooters.
Great information there. I'm going to open it up to some questions now, because I want you to be able to ask specific questions in all the categories that we've covered. So be thinking of what you may want to ask these guys, and we'll get to everybody. I'm going to have you, once I hear the question, I'm going to repeat it so everybody can hear it, and then we'll direct it to whoever you directed your question to. So where can we start? Who's got a question? Yes, sir.
What advice do you have for teaching youth how to use back tension?
Okay. The question is, what advice do you have in teaching youth back tension? So we'll give that to Jesse and let him run with it.
Okay, yeah, like I stated before, I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you get them up close and make sure that it's set, heavy enough to where they actually have to feel, like I said, even if they're not using the proper technique the first 10, 15, 20 shots or whatever, to where they actually feel, some motion there and they feel how their release works and they don't get scared of it. You can give them a button, or even a wrist strap, and say this is the trigger, this is what makes it go off, and they're going to know that, and they're going to push that trigger, push the button or whatever. Now with the back tension, they may not get the concept of it. They're like, well, I don't understand how this fires. I don't understand, like, where's the button to push? Well, you just got to kind of show them, I know that, the rotation technique is, might not be the correct technique or whatever, but you can, show them that that's how the release actually fires, by rotation. And then let them do that a few times, and then later on, just let them know up front that this ain't really the proper way to do it, but I just want you to do this just until you get used to it. And then later on, like I said, start lightening the release up a little bit, and then start teaching them the proper technique and teaching them how to keep their arm and everything relaxed. Because at first they're going to be, tense and everything. Their arm's not going to be relaxed, but that just comes with time. They get the feel of the release. They feel the motion. They're not aiming at anything. They're going through the motion. They feel it. They feel a shot go off. They know that the release will actually fire the bow without a button. And like I said, just gradually as time goes by, just lighten it up a little bit. And as they're at full draw, if you see their bicep or their wrist, or they got a handful of the release, just touch that portion and let them know that, because a lot of times when you're standing there, you might have your bicep might be tense and you don't even know it, but if you come up there and you touch it or squeeze it or whatever, and you're like, you feel that, and just relax that, and so they can kind of feel that it's tense, and let them know that they have to relax that. But it just takes time, and just going through the motions, and eventually they'll get used to it and get comfortable with it. And some people are a little bit quicker than others, but just let them go through the motions and take it step by step. And once they start to feel that good clean break, that I think then they'll get hooked on it, and they won't want to shoot anything else.
I agree with that, but one thing I want to throw in there real quick is, positive encouragement. I know that when somebody's new to, a different style release, it's not like, you just jump right into it and, you learn how to do it immediately. But encouragement and, in learning back tension, I'm a firm believer that it will take your game from one level and rise it to another level when properly learned, or when you were properly instructed how to do it correctly. And encourage that archer, hey, you can take your game from here to here if you just stick with it, work through the bugs, and learn it correctly. So encourage them in a positive manner, and I think that also helps big time. Yes, sir.
Just a slight follow-up, for whether it's youth or adult, do you encourage, if you ultimately want them to use the click, would you start them with a click?
The question is, if you ultimately want the archer to use a click, do you start them with the click, or do you start them, without a click? Reo?
I would say that you'd give them what you're going to use them. If you want them to use a click, I would kind of let them learn with a click. But I think Jesse hit right. You want to be up close, make sure it's really slow so that they can feel it and understand what's going on and not be afraid of it. If every release, I don't know if you've noticed, every one of us has talked about a set that makes it so that no one's afraid of it. Because I think the biggest part of target panic or leading down that road is fear. And so I think the biggest part with a young kid or in an adult or whatever is teaching them how to do it so they're not afraid of it. And if you believe a click helps a guy so that he doesn't punch himself in the face or whatever, then I would let them feel that so that they can see, like say, it drives me crazy when it bounces. So maybe if you're teaching them and they see that it bounces, it doesn't drive them as crazy. So that might be one thing that you put into consideration with how you're going to teach them or what you're looking at teaching them.
And also when using a click, I think it's important, not to completely get up there and come to full draw and start your aiming process and then have the click hit. Because that just interrupted that whole process and you're basically starting over. So the way I've set mine, I don't use a click all the time, or don't use a back tension release all the time, but I do sometimes indoors. And it's important to not start your shooting sequence until you hear the click, because you get that interruption Next thing you know, you got what you're looking at, your target is maybe a 7 second shot. The next thing you know, you're 12, 13, 14 second shot, and it's just, goes downhill from there. So my, opinion of that would be to, as soon as you settle into your anchor point, set it to where the release clicks. And you can do it real easy just by, adjusting the clicks or the moons, to however you anchor. Once you hit that anchor, boom, it clicks. And then you can start your whole aiming process, and it speeds everything up. Next question? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jake.
Jake?
Just for clarification on your shot execution, is it the relaxation, like these guys are talking about, is it relaxation that creates the fingers through this, or the string through the fingers to initiate the follow through?
We're just clarifying Jake's shooting sequence on how to release it with the muscles in his arm, or he's going to explain it to you here.
Yeah, I mean, you have to relax them. It's totally different with these guys. If they relax their forearms so much, the release would come out of their hands. But yes, essentially you have to relax enough to let the string push your fingers out of the way, basically. And that's where a lot of people have an issue with that, because they will slowly relax their fingers. Like if I tell an archer, okay, now just relax your fingers and let the string go by, they do this. So did you see how my fingers slowly opened? So that's where I kind of go, okay, I mean, that's the right way to do it, but you don't want to do it slowly. And I say, okay, now just imagine the string cutting through your fingers, and it looks more like this. Okay, so yes, you have to relax your fingers. It's not like shooting an old hook release where you slowly hinge it around the string and eventually it just pops by the hook. You just basically have to imagine the string cutting through your fingers. I mean, I really use that analogy.
But you're doing that more through the forearm?
Yeah, I mean,
as opposed to relax the hand, relax the forearm?
Yeah, because the forearm has the muscles that closes the fingers. So it has to come from the forearm, but your brain doesn't go, okay, now relax your forearm to open your fingers and then use your extensors to open your hand. They just say, open your hand. So it's not necessary. I definitely don't think you should have an overabundance of tension in your hand. That's something that Dan talked about. Basically the same type of thing when you're shooting a recurve. You want it as relaxed as possible. Now, something that I do is when I'm teaching people too, I teach them intensity. Now intensity is, okay, this is 0. This is 10. I'm squeezing as hard as I can. But I can close my hand with a 2. And I say, I tell them, and they think it's a joke, but archery is about being lazy. Do the minimum amount of work that you possibly can, because then you actually will have the most amount of control that you can have. Because if I try to do a 10 all the time, you can't control it. Okay? So you want to do minimum amount of work, and then you'll have the maximum amount of control.
Next question? Yes, sir.
I know most of you guys shoot a back tension in tournament situations, but let's say you get outdoors and like a finger round, or you're shooting like Reading, for instance. What do you do in a windy situation when you're constantly blowing off target?
Okay, so the question is, in windy situations, he pointed out that a lot of guys shoot back tension, which becomes a little more difficult in the wind. We'll have kind of probably Reo touch on this because he shoots in the wind a lot, Jesse as well.
The biggest thing I do, and I've kind of, I used to carry a button in my bag and think, oh yeah, I'll pick it up and shoot it. But for the most part, I practice so much with my hinge or my back tension when I go out to shoot that I'm so much more familiar with it. So what I've learned a lot is when the wind gives me a little break, I just be more aggressive with it. Like I said, I can't punch one. Guys are, oh yeah, I can rip it off or whatever. I can't do that. Mentally in my head, I can't wrap my head around that. So I get more aggressive with it. I have 2 years ago in Turkey found that probably a button would have been better because it was so windy there that guys were missing the whole bail. And so, I mean, we're talking 40 plus gusting to 60. So, but other than that, for the most part, I try and stick with what has been more consistent with me and just be more aggressive when you get the openings in the wind and stuff like that. And I think guys ask a lot of questions about wind and how to shoot in it. I think the biggest part is to be monotonous and patient. because you get those gaps, you get the things in it, you just got to wait for them instead of forcing it off when you're whipping around and all that stuff. And so I think that's a huge part of shooting in the wind is just patience and working and using what you're familiar with. Because I can tell you, I watched guys grab that button out, and 90% of them, unless they took an hour beforehand to get really set and used to it, it ends up being an ugly thing because they're so used to shooting the other way, to change that quick. And I will say one thing with the new release that matches up, it's a little better, but for the most part, it's still just a hard transition.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yes, do you find any inherent problems with switching over just temporarily, practicing, building up slowly into a back tension?
Okay, I'll let Jesse address that, but the question is, do you, if I understand correctly, do you have problems if you're, I didn't quite...
I guess the question is that if you're normally shooting a thumb release, is there any inherent problems in gradually switching over to a hinge release, say shoot around and then for 10 shots, 20 shots, monkey with the hinge release?
Okay, so basically transitioning from a thumb to a hinge.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, what I see anyhow, people coming off a button release going to a hinge is they don't have that relaxed hand because they're basically, if they don't come from a hinge shooting and go into a button release, they don't have the relaxed hand, so they're more apt to be up tighter on the release and wanting to fire by actually pushing the button rather than shooting like Dan talks about, keeping your thumb kind of stationary and kind of letting the release slip through your hand as you're relaxing and then taking up that slack on the back end. So I think that's the biggest thing is people generally are not as relaxed coming from a button and going to a back tension. And to shoot a back tension properly, I think for the most part, you have to be more relaxed than that. You have to kind of, let everything be relaxed there. So you just gotta, kind of tell yourself that, and I think that you should shoot both the same way. I mean, you should shoot a button and a hinge, pretty much the same way with a relaxed hand. So you just gotta tell yourself to be relaxed with it because, like I said, if you're not with the hinge, you're gonna feel that tension there and you're not gonna have a consistent shot timing.
I'm going to touch on that one a little bit too, because I think really, if you're describing what you're talking about, if you're trying to like phase into something or you're trying to learn it, I think you need to make a commitment. And if it's something that you're learning how to do, and you're trying to like actually, learn a technique, you need to commit to it wholeheartedly. And I know Brandon said that you could take, back tension is going to take your game from here to here, but you have to be realistic with it and understand that if you're here, it's first going to take you down. You're probably going to get worse because you're learning the process, and then you're going to get better. And then, there's going to come a point where you're firing shots and you're not doing it right. You're doing it wrong. But you know what? You're on the right track because you're actually committed to learning how to fire a bow properly. And then someday something's going to happen where you're actually going to use the right muscles and you're going to fire a shot properly and you're going to feel that. And once you feel that light bulb's going to kind of click. And from there you're going to keep searching for that feeling again, that shot, that the way it fired, the way it felt. And then you're going to learn, you're going to get to the point where rather than learning how to do it right, you're going to actually be to the point where, like Reo was talking about, where you can't do it wrong. I mean, that's really the difference. That's where we practice so much professionally. We're not trying to learn how to do it right. We're trying to get to the point where we can't do it wrong. And until you learn to get it right, I wouldn't switch back and forth. A jack of all trades is a master at none. So pick one, pick a back tension, pick a button, pick a thumb or a finger trigger or whatever, and learn to execute the shot properly and perfectly. And then once you've learned that, then go ahead and if you want to dabble in a thumb button or something like that and learn how to perfect that, go ahead. But also I would say totally commit to that style and learn to shoot it properly. And in the wind, the other thing, everybody's going to shoot bad. So wind is hard. It's crappy. Don't like over prepare yourself for worst case scenarios. Don't go out there and practice your butt off and only on super windy days, because chances are you're not going to get better at shooting in the wind. You're going to make yourself worse at shooting when it's not windy, because you're going to develop high anxiety. You're going to learn bad habits because you're trying to band-aid a problem that's really going to cause havoc through everybody that's shooting. So mentally wrap your head around the fact that, it's windy, everybody's probably going to have a bad day. Try to not beat yourself up over it. Just go out there and try to execute the best shots you can and not force anything.
Next question? Yes, sir.
Concept when we're teaching people, it's trying to get them in the same spot. What techniques do you guys, where do you put your hand back to the anchor point?
Okay. Developing a consistent anchor point. What kind of advice would you have, Jesse, on getting to the same spot every time on your face?
I always, I'll do the eyes closed technique, come to full draw. If their draw length and everything's set properly, I'll tell them to come to full draw with their eyes shut, so they don't have a peep there. Even if there's a peep not in the string, I still tell them to shut their eyes and get back to where everything just feels really, really comfortable, and just and have them do that a few times, and then put a peep in their string, and then have them come back, do that again, open up their eyes, see if they can see through the peep, and then once they have that their peep as a reference, then that's kind of a little aid in coming to the same anchor point again. Some people shoot with it. Some people are more comfortable with their hand, more up or more down. I basically rest my jawbone, my index finger underneath my jawbone a little bit right there, and so I think it's just something and everyone's different. So, but I think the eyes closed technique and coming back and letting them get nice and comfortable and doing that a few times is one of the easiest ways to find a consistent anchor.
One thing to remember there is everybody is different, and somebody shooting with glasses like myself, I may have to turn my head more. I may not anchor with the string on the tip of my nose like the majority of the archers do. So understand that everybody's different, and hey, somebody with glasses may have to anchor on the side of their nose with their string, and same way with their arms, hands. Some people can't shoot like guys out there like Jeff Hopkins that has their wrist really bent back like this. It's just not in some people's anatomy to be able to twist their hand like that and be comfortable. But everybody's different, and understanding that I think is an important part of it. Next question? Yes, sir.
My question is directed at Jake. One thing I've noticed, like you said, finding that point of doing the least amount of work for the most control. I've had trouble with struggling to find that point with my bottom finger being lost, as I try to stay relaxed. And I'm just wondering, I guess, if you have any tips on maintaining pressure and finger placement on the string.
So the question is for Jake and maintaining finger pressure and control on the string.
All right, so what I can suggest is whatever you're gonna do, commit to, okay? Now, we have yet to put pressure force plates or pressure meters on our fingers to actually see the amount of pressure and the percentage of pressure on each finger. So whatever bow weight I'm shooting, there's gonna be 100% of pressure somewhere between these three fingers. We don't know. We can kind of try to subjectively say, but we don't really know. So the only way that I can really help with that is, unless it's your tab slipping on your string or your finger slipping on your tab, it is because of your inside your personal view of what's going on. So what you want to do is you want to hook your fingers on the string however you want them to be, and as you pull back, you just have to maintain it. Now what I'm imagining you're doing is, because as you're pulling back, the bow's getting heavier and heavier, and you're feeling pressure build on your fingers. But instead of feeling the pressure build on your fingers as you're pulling back, you're relaxing your finger to try to maintain the same pressure that you were when you were down here as opposed to here. Does that make sense? So I think it's just your conception of what should I be feeling. So you're just used to feeling, okay, the pressure builds to here and then it just feels the same till I get to here. And then what happens is you've relaxed and you've lost your bottom finger. as opposed to you get here, you feel pressure build, and then as you keep pulling back, you really, really, really feel the pressure build, and then as you're executing, you still feel the pressure build on your fingers, and you're just having to force yourself to continue to add pressure. So, I mean, that's the easiest way that I can explain it right now.
Okay, we got time for probably one or two more questions, and feel free to come up and ask the guys more. We'll be here for a little while if we didn't get to you. So, yes, sir.
Jake's comments about the sight going down. I have a lot of customers who struggle with that.
Okay.
I'd like to hear from the three release shooters
Okay.
if they've experienced that, or if they have people that do that and what they do overcome it.
Okay. The question is, he's got customers where the sight picture or their sight goes down throughout the shot sequence. So we're going to have he wants the release shooters to respond to that.
It is a pretty common problem that I've seen too, and it's just it's a form of anticipation, target panic, whatever you want to call it. Basically, I think it's your mind, has a certain picture that it wants to see, that it sees as perfect, before the shot needs to fire, and a lot of people in the anticipation is basically a fear of that. Once it's a fear of as soon as your mind sees that, perfect sight picture of what you have in your mind, the shot needs to fire right away. So it's just an anticipation thing. So what I do is, as I take the person, up close to the bail, do the blank bail thing, but then I also start them up close on a big target, something that they're not going to miss, something that their sight pin can go well inside of the 10 ring or whatever and float around, and they're going to have a really, really hard time of coming out of the bottom of that. Depending on the release aid that they're shooting, a lot of times the problem can stem from that and having the release to where it's maybe too sensitive, and they're scared that as soon as they touch that trigger it's going to go off. They can't really get aggressive enough with it to really feel what's going on and then actually work through the shot. So if it's that problem, I'll maybe set the trigger or the back tension heavier to where they have to work for it. And depending on the problem, depending on if it's more of a release aid problem, fitment issue, I'll try to fix that first, and then have them focus on not worrying about where they're shooting, or what they're shooting at, but also putting a big target up there and something just to build confidence to where they're, like I said, their sight pin can stay well in the middle. They don't have to worry about not aiming, where they're supposed to be aiming, and just focus on that good pure shot, and try to tell them to picture what their perfect shot would look like, their perfect follow through would look like, and try to have that in their mind and just focus on that as their fact they're aiming. Don't focus on the sight pin, don't focus on the release, don't focus on anything else except have that vision in your mind of what you want to look like as you shoot the bow, and just have them keep thinking about that as they're going through the shot. But I think a lot of times it's a hard habit to break, and a lot of times you have to do different things for different people, because everyone has their own way of getting out of target panic. But a lot of times it is something technical or mechanical as far as the release, or even draw length and the wrong stabilizer setups and stuff like that can start to cause some issues. But like I said, I think the main thing is to get their mind off of focusing on aiming at something and their mind off of focusing on their release. Just have them focus on that mental picture of what they feel like is a perfect shot.
I definitely experienced it. I've had target panic when I first started shooting. It was a long time ago. I didn't know how to properly execute a shot. I shot a draw length that was 29 inches or 28 and a half. I'm actually like 27 and a quarter now. But I mean, just all the things that Jesse was talking about, draw length was wrong. I didn't know what I was doing. I punched the trigger. I mean, that's how I set the bow off. And eventually over time, it gave me target panic. Now I hit a point where it was like where Jake was at. It was so frustrating to shoot. Like it wasn't enjoyable anymore. And so now the difference is maybe for some people, like there's a difference between somebody wanting to like get better and then somebody willing to get better. And it is a rocky road to fix target panic, because it's archery or shooting a bow is so much of muscle memory that like once you train your body to do something wrong, it's really hard to break that. And so you have to totally commit to changing and be willing to like go through some sort of drills to get yourself through it, whether it's blank bailing or doing something. But you have to, one, get everything set up so that it properly fits you, and then two, commit to doing it right. And you know, a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, back tensions, you know, it might scare a lot of you guys to try one or shoot one or to get somebody to use one. And Brandon talked about ones with safeties and stuff. You know, if you shoot a straight up hinge style release like this, you're probably gonna hit yourself in the face. I mean, let's just be real, it's gonna happen. But you're gonna live, you're gonna survive. I mean, it's not like detrimental to your life or you're gonna have nightmares or anything. It's gonna make you a better shot. And that's something you like have to realize, is that you have to commit to that and know that like, I'm gonna draw this thing back and eventually I'm gonna get it. Now, it might take you a little bit. It might pre-fire, you might be practicing and it might fire early. You know, if you're not shooting a click and you're gonna miss. You know, you're gonna have those fears that you have and the things that cause your anxiety. And that's what the whole problem is it's all anxiety. And so like if you slowly work through that stuff and try to get rid of all the tension in your body, all the tension in your face, a lot of that comes from your setup. You know, when you're actually drawing back and you're anchoring in, you should work on like relaxing your face, relaxing all the tension in your body, only using the muscles that you absolutely need to have like involved. They're the only ones that should be tense. If you can get there, that'll help. And then over time, back tension, because it's like a really relaxed style of shooting, because you're using so many less muscles to actually fire a shot. It's like Jake really hit the nail on the head when he said, you know, using the least amount of muscles to do a job is how you have the most control over it. And I think that's why back tension is so much more accurate, is because you're literally using probably 10% of the same amount of effort to fire a perfect shot is what the person that's struggling, you know, with target panic, that's fighting, trying to, you know, keep his bow up in the dot, and he's just crazy anxious the whole time, and then it fires low anyway, and he's trying 10 times harder than any of us. I mean, it's actually really hard to do something wrong, even doing something like torque tuning or something. It feels stupid to grab a hold of the bow and actually try to do something wrong or put a little torque in it. And so you have to work through it. And I think that's the biggest misconception people have to when they get target panic, is they're like, oh, I'm gonna fix it in a week. No, you're not. You're probably not gonna fix it this year. I mean, it's something that you're gonna have to really commit to, and you're gonna have to work through it every day until it's gone, until you get to the point where Reo's at, where it's, or me, where I'm not gonna punch my trigger no matter what. I'd rather take a 0 at the end of the day and fire my shot properly than to force one. Because forcing the shot, I might hit a bullseye today, but it's gonna cause me problems for the next month, and I don't wanna deal with them. So I would rather shoot it properly, and that's mentally where a person has to get to. And it's really hard to try to push somebody to make that choice, because you can't make somebody change, but if they really want to, you know, with proper guidance or proper coaching or something like that, you guys as dealers could help somebody, you know, through that you know, point.
All right, Reo, final thoughts on target panic?
I would say they covered it. I mean, there ain't much more to add to it. There's a lot that they put in there that I would say. I mean, I think blank bail's a huge part of it. I think Danny's right. You got to spend the time and be willing to commit to it, because it's, you know, I've heard guys say, well, it's the angle you hold this or the angle you hold that. That's why you hold low. I firmly believe it's a fear of putting the dot in the middle and letting it go off. I had target panic when I was 12 and actually quit archery till I was 19. I hated it. I couldn't draw up, count to 1 and shoot. And so to me, it's a big part of like committing and learning how to shoot and how to not be afraid to put that dot in the middle and let it go off. And so I think that's a big part of the freezing beneath. I've had friends that do it, and then they'll move their sight so that they can freeze beneath and shoot it in the middle, but I think that's the worst way to do it. I think the best thing to do is, go through the right steps and get it fixed right, and you'll be better off down the long run.
Wonderful. Thank you all for coming. We've got some flyers up here if you would like the guys to sign to take back to your shops or to some local shooters or whatever. We'll be here 5, 10, 15 minutes. We went over a little bit. The show's about to open, but enjoy the show. Reo's got a series of releases. Jesse's got a series of releases. Stop by and see them over at the booth. And both those guys and a lot of the others will be there all day today, in and out. So thank you all again.